Iraqi protesters withdraw from the area near the American embassy in Baghdad at the request of the PMU, that's the Popular Mobilization Units. In a statement, the Iraqi military said the demonstrators have left the area completely. Many of the protesters started setting up a camp outside a nearby hotel. This after the PMU called protesters to withdraw out of respect for the Iraqi government, which had asked to avoid any escalation. It said the demonstrators' message has been heard. Meanwhile, the embassy said in a statement all consular operations have been suspended until further notice. Over the past 2 days, protesters have rallied outside the U.S. mission, calling for the withdrawal of American forces from the country. American forces fired tear gas from the embassy complex to disperse the crowd. Anger is boiling over Sunday's U.S. airstrikes on PMU positions in Anbar province, which left over 30 people dead. Iraqi political and religious leaders have slammed the strikes as a violation of Iraq's sovereignty. Washington has urged Baghdad to fully protect the embassy. The U.S. has also announced the deployment of 750 paratroopers to the Middle East in response to anti-American rallies. Joining us out of Ontario, Canada for more on the story is Jason Unruhe, political commentator. Hey there, Jay. Pleasure to have you back on Press TV. Your thoughts on the way things are folding in Iraq as we see them?
Well, this, on the one hand, it makes perfect sense that the Iraqi people would be outraged by the United States continually murdering their people. And not even just murdering people, but murdering security forces whose job it is to stop terrorism inside the country. People who have signed up in order to fight ISIS. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable that the killing of these people by the United States would be a reason to rebel against them. But on the other side, the United States blaming Iran makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I mean, this is one of those situations where the United States is making claims that are so irrational that it baffles the mind. Previously, I saw John Bolton on Twitter, Donald Trump on Twitter saying that, telling the Iraqi people that this is the time to rise up against their Iranian oppressors. This doesn't make any sense. The violence that these people have carried out, it was against the U.S. Embassy for the United States killing their soldiers. But they're trying to spin this as though it's some kind of rebellion against Iran by Iraqi people. I mean, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it makes me wonder if this is clearly intended to propagandize to the American people about what's going on, because obviously the Iraqi people are not fooled by this. The Iranian people are not fooled by this, and I don't think that these statements are intended to fool them. I think this is intended to justify further hostilities, to send more troops into Iraq to the American people. Look, we have to do this because Iran is oppressing them, or Iran is attacking us inside of Iraq, because under no other context does this make any sense whatsoever. Clearly, the U.S. is declining in influence inside the country as the Iraqi people are beginning to rebel in greater and greater numbers against the U.S. occupation. And the U.S. has to come up with some kind of justification for spending more troops, to send more troops into the country in order to repress that rebellion against them. But they need some kind of a justification for the people at home in the U.S. whose sons and daughters have to go off and actually fight this conflict. I think the Trump administration, for all of its bluster during the actual campaign, saying that they wanted to end the wars, etc., are creating this lie in order to justify sending more troops into the country. So Trump is not only just going back on his word, but he's also lying to the American people about the reason for being there, to give it some kind of a justification. And I think given the current situation that he's embattled in right now with his possible impending impeachment, I think that this makes perfect sense for him to try to make it sound like he's still trying to keep up one of his campaign promises in the face of all this pressure coming down with the Democrats who are seeking to have him removed from office. So politically, it's complicated on the U.S. side, but for the rest of the world, for the Iraqi people, for the Iranian people, this is a very simple situation, and one that is wholly nonsensical.
And Jason, do you think that the U.S. is oblivious to what it's done to the Iraqi people on Iraqi soil for the last 17 years when it makes statements like that?
I think when they make these statements that the United States political establishment knows very well what they have done. That they know that they came in with a war under a complete lie and murdered 1.5 million people inside the country. They know what kind of suffering has happened as a result. Maybe some of the American people don't know, but those in power, those who make the decisions like this to send more forces into the country, to make such blatant lies in defense of the attempt to reform the crumbling U.S. empire, they know very well what they're doing. They're outright lying, and it's not even a good lie. It's not even one that's even acceptable to anybody outside the United States. Nobody believes this. Normally, you have in many countries the supporters of the U.S. who believe that the U.S. can do no wrong, and even they, at this point, are looking at the situation and not believing them. To believe that the Iraqi people attacked the American embassy as a rebellious act against Iran, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
All right, bud. Thanks for joining us, and have a happy New Year out of Ontario. Jason Unruhe, political commentator.
Thank you.